The importance of student, parent, and teacher advocacy is almost at its all-time high because there are so many issues from gun control, being your true self, police in the classroom, banned books, you name it, that are impacting you and your everyday life as students trying to learn. And I had the opportunity to sit down with our partner nonprofit today, IDRA, also known as the Intercultural Development Research Association. And one of their main goals is to transform education by putting youth first. That means empowering you, the student, to make the changes and argue for policies that you want to have a better classroom experience. So how are we going to dive into that? Well, I was privileged enough to sit down with a bunch of their team members, and we had hours and hours of conversation that I've condensed down to some of my favorite highlights from our interviews together. We're going to dive through those interviews and just get some insights on how to get more involved in the IDRA's programs, and also just do more with them as an organization. For the sake of organizing all these together, we've got 4 main categories we'll dive into today. The first is, who in the world is IDRA? We'll have their CEO speak to us about their organization and some of their success stories. From there, we'll dive into, if you're a student, how do you actually become more involved and participate in some of the policy changes and just overall information that they put out as a nonprofit. 3, we'll dive into, if you are a parent or a teacher, how do you kind of leverage some of their advocacy programs so you can start arguing on positive changes on behalf of your student or your children. And finally, we'll end with some success stories or just things to motivate you and get you excited about all the wonderful things that IDRA has done over the past 50 years they have been around as an organization. What I'm going to do is, there's so much content, we're going to let everybody kind of get introduced as they're diving into their topic areas, and I'll pop in here and there as I'm letting the interviews roll, just to give you some context about what category we're in and make sure you can learn as much as you can from this jam-packed episode. Before we start, please take a moment now to like and subscribe. It makes a massive difference for the channel. The only reason a lot of these nonprofits let us come out and make content and feature them is because folks like you like and support the content, so we get more eyes on their organization, so they're more incentivized to talk with us. So take a moment, smash the bell, smash the like, and let's dive in and learn more about IDRA.
My story actually started at IDRA in my mother's womb. My mom was an intern here in 1981, when the year I was born, and I didn't know this then when I joined IDRA, but it's in my blood. We were started 50 years ago as a civil rights organization, and my parents both were part of the civil rights movement. IDRA in 1973 was founded really based on that energy from the civil rights movement. You know, just a few years before we were founded, students right here in San Antonio at some of the poorest school districts in the nation were demanding more educational rights and walking out of class. They were organizing with their parents and community advocates to demand better schools, and from that, IDRA was really founded by an educator, Dr. Jose Cardenas, who was a superintendent of Edgewood ISD, one of the poorest school districts in the nation then and now, and really based on that energy from activists wanting to ensure that all students had the right to learn. And IDRA as an organization believes first and foremost that all students have the potential to learn, that all families have an interest in their children's education, despite some myths, and that all students and families inherently bring assets to the table and should be respected and valued as part of the educational process and educational decision making, both at the local school district and the state and federal levels. IDRA's mission is to ensure that we build strong public schools that ensure that all students can access and succeed in college and beyond in life. And we do that in 4 major ways. First, we advocate public policies that are centering impacted communities, particularly in Texas, Georgia, and at the federal level. Secondly, we work to train thousands of teachers across the U.S. South every single year to ensure that all students, regardless of their race, immigration status, national origin, or gender, can succeed in school, and that they don't have to, when they show up to school, leave their identities behind at the schoolhouse door. And that's something that, we know that is under attack right now, that not all students feel that they can attend safe and welcoming schools that honor their lived experiences and their histories and languages and cultures. And so we work with teachers every single year to ensure that all students feel safe, welcomed, and nourished at school, and that they are prepared to go to college. We work in policy, we work to train teachers, we work to produce actionable and accessible research, and finally, we work to engage communities and ensure that students and parents are seen as the leaders that they are. We believe that all children are valuable, none is expendable, and all students have the power to learn and the possibility of becoming leaders. That's why you've seen in Texas and in Georgia, we are leading the coalitions and working with our allies to fight back against classroom censorship, to ensure that all students again can show up to school as their full selves, and that the schools are sustaining their culture, sustaining their language, and affirming their identities in providing excellent and equitable education.
Well, the bigger milestones for me have been that at one time I was the lead trainer. We've done an awful lot of teacher training, especially in the areas we're most concerned about. And for children that we're most concerned about, the underserved. We've done teacher training, we've done a lot of research. We've recalibrated how research is done because we found a lot of research models looking at the kids through a deficit lens. So one big contribution is everything we do is through an asset-based lens. Our teacher training, our work with families, our work with research, our work with policy, all of it comes through the lens of our view of the community, the underserved community especially, and how we keep stressing the values in that community and the strength in that community.
On the policy, advocacy, and community engagement team, we really focus on ways that we can drive research-based and community-centered policies. And so we have a policy agenda that focuses on different areas like school funding and programs for English learners or emergent bilingual students and access to higher education and school discipline and safety. And then we also help to coordinate statewide coalitions of individuals and organizations in Texas and Georgia who are interested in learning more about policymaking and really influencing how policymaking happens at the state level. And then finally, we work with organizations locally to really support the work that they're doing. So if they have gathered and have really identified an issue in their school and community, we want to make sure that we help them out with understanding the process for changing policies in their community, how they can access and use data, and how they can really organize to create powerful advocacy campaigns. So IDRA works on 5 key policy priority areas. We want to make sure that our public schools are fairly funded. We want to make sure that there are excellent programs for emergent bilingual or English learner students. We want to make sure that schools are preparing all students to access and succeed in college. We focus on school discipline and safety issues. And then finally, we focus on culturally sustaining schools. So making sure that we're creating the schools where every student feels welcome. They don't have to check any aspect of their identity at the door in order to feel like school is a safe and wonderful place for them to be. And so we work on those policy areas across the South, but really focus our advocacy efforts in Texas, Georgia, and at the federal level. So we think about the state laws in Texas and Georgia and the state policies and agencies in Texas and Georgia that impact public schools and students like students of color and emergent bilingual students and students from families with limited means. And then we also think about how federal laws and policies impact those students and how we can ensure that those students and their families are engaged in the policy-making processes at the state and federal level. So one thing that we say at IDRA is everyone is a policy advocate. And so we really deeply believe that everybody has the right and responsibility to engage in policy making and do that, in a coordinated way, a way that is respectful of the process, but certainly in a way that pushes and changes and makes the process more equitable for everyone and ensures access for everyone. So one thing that people can do to ensure that they engage in that is certainly to join our listservs, where we send out all sorts of policy updates about what's going on, opportunities to be involved in advocacy. If you're part of an organization, we facilitate statewide coalitions in Texas and Georgia. In Texas, it's TLEAC, the Texas Legislative Education Equity Coalition, which is a statewide cross-sector coalition that does work on Texas policy. In Georgia, it's the Georgia Coalition for Educational Justice, again, a statewide cross-sector coalition. So organizations should join those coalitions, and I believe there is a link while I'm talking for people to be able to access that. And certainly if you are unable to do that type of advocacy, we always appreciate any sort of support that people are able to give to IDRA as an organization.
It's very difficult, I think, sometimes, or at least I would assume, right, to always be on the forefront of these, be it a hot button issue, or it's hard to give students voices sometimes, especially if marginalized communities historically have the reason that a lot of times they're marginalized is they don't have the power to speak out, they don't have the resources. So I think it's phenomenal what you all are doing to kind of bring them into the limelight. What's your inspirational moment of here's why I'm here? This is this is what keeps me going, because it's got to be difficult. Maybe I'm totally wrong on this, but I just
I think in the face of well-funded anti-democratic actors that are seeking to attack public schools and our students and our communities, I think one of the things that gives us radical hope and inspiration is the shoulders that we stand on. Looking back over this year, our 50th anniversary year, we've done a lot of reflection on all of the greats that came before us. And I think that intergenerational change, connecting the shoulders that we stand on with new voices, with voices of young people and their parents, I think that intergenerational aspect of our work continues to give us hope. Who are we not to have hope and ensure that we continue to build people power to create better futures for our children?
Our face-to-face work is the pay dirt. It's the actual good work, because our model really of family engagement is a little bit different to the traditional models. You have parents seen, I would say, negatively as a cheap labor pool, in the sense of that they're volunteers, they raise money, but a lot of times it's tinged with deficit. It's like the family is something broken that has to be fixed. That's why the kid is not doing well in school. What we need to focus on is family leadership and education, which means families, especially the families that have been reached out before, the ones that are underserved, that they understand and know what's going on in school, that they know policy and practice, and that they can transform public school policy and practice.
So that was a little bit about what IDRA is and their mission, their goal. You can tell they've done a lot as an organization, just empowering students to be the change makers they want to be in the classroom. So let's hear a little bit more about those student programs and dive into what you can do as a student that wants to participate and be a policy advocate.
IDRA has a really long history of student-led advocacy and engaging with students, but the Youth Advisory Board was one of our first programs that actually directly hired students to be part of the leadership team. So in 2022, we had 10 students across the state of Texas, 10 high school students, who were part of a group that not only learned about education policy, how it works at the state level, how to connect with advocacy opportunities, but they were directly involved in helping us to create some of our advocacy strategies at IDRA. So it was a really fun opportunity to not just kind of impart the expertise that we have as an institutional perspective, but give them an opportunity to help us develop strategies around how to better engage students, but actually how to show up better for students in the spaces that we normally do.
Plus, it's going to be a great experience for the students too, right? I mean, they're the ones who are impacting change. They're hearing their voice and kind of building that new policy. Are they continuing to look at policy, or what's kind of the lasting effects of that?
Yeah, so really cool projects came out of our Youth Advisory Board program. We actually had the students directly involved in developing the curriculum, and part of that, kind of in the second half of the program, we spent a lot of time helping students connect in spaces where they were really passionate about. So for example, we had one group of students who was really interested in connecting with kind of coalition spaces, and so they were really interested in learning about the communications aspect of advocacy in our organization. We had another group of students who was really interested in research and how to connect advocacy, policy, and research. And so from that group, we developed a small research team who developed a project, a mixed methods project. Youth participatory action research is the term. It's just a fancy way of saying that there's a group of students who see a problem in their community and want to take action in a responsive way. So that was one of the coolest projects. But I will say, like, as a larger program, in celebration of IDRA's 50th anniversary, they also planned, led, and facilitated a youth summit, which was really cool. It was a collaborative space between other youth who were interested in learning more about advocacy opportunities, but it was just, again, a great way for them to meet students who were also just as passionate about some of the ideas that they were learning about.
I think it's so important to empower students to actually be able to make change makers, and, have them be change makers and show them you can be the difference you want to see. So can you tell me a little bit more about that, from how students get started to just why youth advocacy is so important in your eyes?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned too about students kind of being the change that they want to see. So we often say nothing for students without students, and that I think captures our approach to our youth work. Young people are brilliant, and they have ideas that don't really exist within the confines of certain structures that might oppress their ideas. And so what's important about that is that they are closest to the solutions, in such that they're more resilient and more inclusive, more responsive to the diverse environments that they really want to see in their schools. And I think also what's really important about youth advocacy in general is that in order for advocates to help create these equitable spaces, we need to really leverage the voices of our students to help us decide what that could look like. So, and I think that, again, that's one of my favorite parts about what I do, is that I get to work directly with these students. So while I get to teach them about, research, best practices in doing research, how to create research questions, they're teaching me a lot about how to be more responsive to the needs that they have, and the visions that they have. They, I think, inspire me to just be a bit bolder, dream bigger about what I want to see as being equitable schools.
What's the next steps then for the next class of students coming into this program? Do you have the cohort ready now? Are you kind of getting funding for that, or how do we get folks watching involved?
Absolutely. So we're always seeking funding to help support our programs. So our vision is that the next year, 2024, we'll have our new cohort of students. And so we're actually really excited too. We have a few students, about 3 or 4 of them, that will be advisors to the next cohort. So they'll kind of help us, again, be co-facilitators of the program, such that they'll help inform what the curriculum will look like. They'll be mentors to our new cohort of students. And that's really, again, this broader vision that IDRA has for building out a student network that transcends kind of the smaller region of Texas, but much larger, broader regional focus. Like, how do we connect students on a broader level who are interested in advocacy, who are interested in research, who are interested in policy work? So that kind of connection between our cohorts is going to be really vital, we think, into building a really resilient kind of student network. Our Youth Advisory Board does directly connect to Texas-based work. However, our broader vision for this program is to have a more regional presence, and so connecting with other student coalitions like the one in Georgia is really crucial for us, and will be a really good blueprint for how to do that in other spaces in an intrastate kind of way. My quote-unquote guinea pig, and such, that I was learning exactly how to structure a project like this. In that project, we started off talking a little bit about best practices of survey research, what is the difference between traditional research and community-oriented research, and how do we allow the students space to create the research questions, collect the data, analyze it, and create reports that really outline recommendations for adults to consider in these spaces to create more equity in their schools. And so from that research project, there was actually an opportunity to apply for funding for another youth action research project that I'm currently co-facilitating, revolved around ethnic studies in San Antonio schools. So that student group is currently in the middle of collecting data. They went through the same process of learning how to produce questions, how to collect data. So now we're mentoring them through the process. But again, these are original ideas that the students developed themselves. We simply just provide a space and provide technical expertise in how to get the research done. So we're really excited about these 2 research projects, because I think they're just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what IDRA hopes to do in this space with students. Connecting students to research is critical, because it's a way for them to bridge advocacy and policy in a way that's legitimate and that shows up and I think gathers attention from adults, where traditionally students are not in that space. It's really cool to see them be leaders in that space.
It's exciting because we're training the leaders of tomorrow how to go through the thought process and make the changes that inspire them most. And that's what we should be doing, right? It's realistic examples, it's how they're doing it, and it takes them, how do you apply what you're learning in the classroom to then improve the classroom? I think that's such a cool full circle story.
Yeah, and I think too, to your point, Autonomy in research is imperative, and for students particularly, because like you said, they're not going to be young people forever. They're creating environments in which when they become adults, they can see those things through fruition if we give them the space, if we give them the resources, if we create opportunities for them. And I think that's important to recognize too, is that students are not going to be students forever, right? There are going to be members of society that we are, like as adults. I think that's what makes it even more crucial that we invite them into these spaces that we get to interact with every day as advocates. But, leveraging our privilege for them is, as I think, the most crucial thing about our job. One of our broader visions for IDRA, and I'll share this as kind of like an anticipated type vision, or goal rather, is kind of creating a larger space to exchange best practices about youth action work. And I think what's really neat between our two research projects, or our two student research teams that are currently finalizing their research or are in the middle of collecting their data, is that there are a ton of students who are interested in plugging into research at this level. And so, if you are interested, if you're an organization or a student group that's interested in getting involved in research right now around issues that are important to you and your peers, connect with us, because that would be a really great opportunity to collaborate and talk through about how to better provide space for you to be able to do these types of projects. And so that's one kind of example that we see coming out of this youth research work, is creating like a broader network around that. Or reach out. All our staff are very personal, and we love to meet new people, and we love to connect you where you can. So we're open to meeting you, connect with us directly, or all our staff information is on our website. So again, we're very friendly staff. We're a small group, and so with that, we tend to be very personal when it comes to connecting with our community members.
People come to us in a lot of different ways, and then we do a lot of outreach to try to support people who we know are trying to do good work in their community. So we have a couple of ways that we do it. We have a network called the Southern Education Equity Network that's both a virtual platform, and it's a way for people to connect with each other across the South, particularly in Texas and Georgia, but we're looking forward to growing that to other states. And it's a way for organizations that are really based in their communities and interested in doing work at the state and national level to learn from each other, to use our data analyses and tools, and to really identify those issues, like you mentioned, either that they're worried about because they have been a common problem in their community, or something that they have noticed over time that they really want to become more engaged in. So they connect with us in a variety of ways, and we're so excited to support that work, because we think that local student and family driven work is really, really important, and that is what is going to be transformative for public education.
So now we're going to shift over to more of the parent and teacher perspective, specifically around the stories of what empowerment can do to allow parents to be change makers at the policy level for education. I think a negative stereotype that we'll actually talk about in one of these interviews is that parents are typically relegated to, hey, you're going to go do a cakewalk, or you can only do a fundraiser, when in reality parents can do so much more to support teachers in our classroom. So let's learn how.
We started working with the parents because they got their test scores, and over half of the sophomores that took the test flunked it. In other words, they were on the list for, hey, this needs work, So we met with the families and first of all explained to them what the data meant. And they said, oh, we're failing math, And so we started talking with them. I said, we need to do a survey with the students and find out, and from families, what's going on. The parents thought that in fact teachers were trying to reteach in different ways. From the data they saw, from what the kids said, no. They said in tutoring, different ways of teaching the concept were brought in. Kids said, no, it's the same teacher doing the same thing after school that we didn't learn it in the morning.
The same thing I didn't understand earlier.
But what it showed is the parents created the survey, got the data, and when they collected all the data, we were working with the principal of that campus. I said, give me some of your bright algebra students to help look at this data and create some tables. They sent me 5 kids. These are the kids that were being sent to the principal because there were behavior problems. But they got together, we gave them the data, and these 5 kids presented to the parents. I get goosebumps because there's kids who were usually not recruited for that. So it met our valuing concept, but the parents said, you know what, the teachers have to be retaught. And so the parents' influence said, teach the teachers, number one, to listen to kids and answer questions, because that was one of the things that wasn't happening. Number two, when concepts are retaught, to be retaught in creative new ways, and to check for understanding. It's another proof in terms of how, if you look right, there's intelligence, there's ideas, and how these parents persist in their vision that education is central to the future of their kids. They just persist in that, which is in contrast to the opinions that a lot of schools have about these families. And so we started seeing and realizing, to telling schools, look, you need to have a pattern of communication, real communication. But right now, even now, they send an email, and I think that's communication with parents. We said, no, you have to have authentic communication. We already knew this, but the parents were reinforcing what authentic communication meant. When you sit down and you listen to parents give their opinions.
So how are y'all changing that? Is it all strictly education for the parents? Is it empowerment? Is it saying, hey, your opinions matter, go have these conversations with your teachers? Or is it just even letting them know that's an option to say, hey,
No. Our process every time we meet is a critical conversation that values their opinion, and you ask them, why is your opinion important? And they say, do you need an education or money? No. Why is education important for your kids? So what do we want to talk about? In other words, that's the process. And getting them used to seeing that their opinion counts, to learn how to listen to others, that's also a task. And that coming together is to lead to some action. They're going to have to do something to transform or improve their neighborhood schools. And so it is open-ended, it is very democratic, but also it's focused because we as an organization have certain principles, certain goals, certain values. And if a group of parents decides to go against with something that we don't value or don't like, we'll say, thank you very much, you can continue, but we're not partners anymore.
So then real quick, walk me through, let's say for the parents watching or for parents trying to get involved, from step 0 to, hey, I want to participate, this sounds like something I care about with my child's school. Did they reach out to you all, or are there events they attend, or what kickstarts the process for community engagement?
There's been many different ways to connect. Sometimes it's because you're invited to a school or to a meeting and you mention this. And we have flyers about our education cafe with the 3 basic principles, and if anybody contacts us, the first thing we do is, can you find 1 or 2 other people from your school or from your area that have their children at school, and let's get together. Start the conversation.
So that's great. That's how parents get started, right? They can kind of come in, but how do they, let's say they've had a great experience, how do they give testimony to what's going on or what they're seeing in their school?
Well, we have a long-term relationship with a grassroots organization that covers several counties in South Texas. It's actually on the border. And these are very sharp ladies, and they've been around for a while. They've got a very powerful grassroots organization that focuses on women's leadership. So we have a regular relationship, and they called and they said, we know the legislature is going to meet, and we want to learn how to give testimony and how to connect with our elected officials, because there's policies we support and there are policies we don't. So we, first of all, the basics of what is the legislature, what does it do? Okay, a very, very down to earth kind of in key terms, and giving them some of the jargon words they needed to know. And then we covered 7 areas of policy that we're concerned about, whether it's discipline, access to college preparation, stuff like that. We said, we are concerned about these issues, and we knew they were too. We were in common. So then they said, what legislation is being proposed? So we looked at and gave them that, and these were different separate sessions, highly interactive, 20 to 30 ladies from the Valley connecting. And these are from distant communities. They weren't like next door neighbors. There were like 6 school districts represented in those conversations. They ended up then actually giving testimony, calling elected officials, especially the senators and the representatives, about issues they were concerned about, and then so excited because they said, I'd never done this before. And it's so exciting because it's renewal of they are smart, they are concerned, and once they're given some information and a path, they'll take it.
I think it's amazing how empowerment can break stereotypes of uninterested or lazy. It's amazing how I think access to that information, which obviously you all provide, is that key for a step to breaking those stereotypes and kind of breaking down the barriers, where it's not, I'm not interested in my child's education. It's, hey, I just need the tools to figure out how to fight the fight. And once I have that, I'm great. I'll call senators. I'll do whatever I need to do. But that empowerment is so cool. And I'm excited to talk to you guys, because that's just very unique thing. You don't see that very often, right?
We can work with folks from start to finish. So sometimes it is identifying a policy or a problem that they want to change in their school. So for example, if a group of families has gathered and they say, we really don't think that the students in our schools and our communities are being prepared for college. We want to think about the types of courses that our students are being offered and how that ensures that they are able to access higher education opportunities. We can help them sort of evaluate what those policies are currently. We help them think about what state and federal policies are that impact that. We have helped families who are in that situation design surveys that they then distribute to their communities. We help them analyze survey results, and then we help them think through what is the solution that they can sort of identify together, and how do they turn that into action? So how do they take their desire to solve a problem in their community? What levers do they push on? Who do they need to talk to? What policymakers need to be involved? And we help them to sort of understand what that process looks like and how they can actually change those policies and work together to do it.
So to wrap things up, we're going to learn about some success stories from IDRA and all the crazy things they've done over the past 50 years. So I pulled some people for their favorite story since they've been at the organization, and I'm going to share those now.
If you're an individual who is really excited about these ideas and just wants to learn more, showing up in spaces like our newsletter or a webinar just to keep abreast of what we're up to is really important. Another idea is that if you have students that that are really excited about being in these spaces, support their interest, have them connect with us, or even hold, like you said, space for students to talk about issues that are really important to them. And I think that's empowering in of itself. Students, again, have solutions to the issues that they care most about, and so simply holding space for them to feel empowered about connecting, collaborating, brainstorming about the solutions that they envision is really important. So while funding and donations are extremely important to the sustainability of programs like the Youth Advisory Board, that may not be within everyone's power, but having independent power in a small space is just as powerful.
Because I think a lot of times people have sort of, they've already identified the problems, they just might need help understanding the process to make change, or might need help articulating what the solution is, or might need to better understand the data. So we really try to support the work that folks are doing and meet them where they are to provide the most useful resources for them in that process. And I agree with you, it's a really exciting time right now. People can see opportunities and ways to be involved, to be part of the policymaking and advocacy process, and so our tools are really designed to do that. I would say one other thing that we do through the network is we have, it's called We All Belong. It's a school resource hub, or an educator resource hub that provides lesson plans, materials, advocacy tips, so that educators, students, and families can really be engaged. They can have curriculum that they're using in the classroom. They can understand tools to make change, especially since we're in a really challenging time for a lot of folks where they're struggling to see themselves in the classroom, see themselves in classroom materials and instruction, and that's really, an issue that they want to be able to solve in their communities. The materials that are on our school resource hub, We All Belong, are really geared for all ages, really accessible across different topics, and responsive to a lot of surveys and focus groups that IDRA did with young people, with families, and with teachers to really identify what the needs in the classroom are. So needs in terms of topics that they want to be able to learn about in their classrooms and in their homes, and needs in terms of format, like what's the easiest way for them to be able to access these materials.
Flagship programs of IDRA is our Valued Youth Partnership, and we are so proud of that program. It has impacted almost 1 million students, families, and educators over the last 4 decades, and that program came about because in 1986 IDRA led the first statewide study of school dropouts in Texas, and found that far too many students were being lost, and schools were not holding on to those students. And this is an issue that it is particularly important to me as a student in San Antonio that graduated with a class that started out as 1,000 that ended with 500 students, and just seeing so much lost potential among my peers. And they were just a few of the almost 2 million students that have been lost since the time that IDRA first conducted that dropout study in 1986. Still today, we're losing far too many students. We're still losing in Texas 1 in 4 Latino and Black students. And thinking about such lost potential, we know that we have to continue to find creative solutions. We have to continue to invest in our public schools and our students. And so that's why programs such as the Valley Youth Partnership are so important. It's not just a dropout prevention program, it's also a student leadership program in which older kiddos tutor and are seen as leaders among their schools to younger tutees. And these are students that were not necessarily making the highest grades. They might have had issues with discipline or attendance, but when schools placed them in positions of leadership and gave them that opportunity to succeed, they showed up and showed out and saw that when their younger tutees, these elementary school students that they were tutoring, that were also struggling in school, they knew they had to show up and that these kiddos were counting on them. And the transformation among these older kids that are in middle and high school has just been phenomenal. And again, this program has impacted so many students. We've seen students go to not just graduate from high school, but go on to college. Many of them become teachers. And so it's just been an amazing flagship program of our organization.
And then working with kids also, you should look at your adultism, because you think they're unformed human beings until they're adults, and then you start realizing they know things, they're experiencing things, and their voice needs to be heard. So it's useful. Very good.
So I have focused most of my policy work across my career, including here at IDRA, on school discipline, policing, and school safety. So how do we create safe and welcoming schools for students where we're not using harmful discipline policies and practices to push them out of the classroom? And I feel particularly strongly about that issue because I think it is an access to education issue. I think it's a civil and human rights issue. We know that students who are disproportionately impacted by school discipline policies are students of color, especially Black students, and students with disabilities, and LGBTQ plus students. And so what gets me most excited is seeing young people connect to that issue and really see themselves as agents of change when it comes to that issue and all of the other interconnected issues that IDRA works on. So I can think in particular about times when I have seen students testify, when I have seen students conduct research about discipline, when I have seen students, go to a legislator's office and demand to be heard and tell the legislator that this is what they want, this is what they think school safety means to them, this is what they know school safety means to their communities and their peers. And so that student engagement is particularly exciting for me and something that has really been important for my work.
One of the reasons I became a civil rights lawyer is because I saw the impact that the law has on education equity. And I was previously directing law and the litigation and policy at a sister organization, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, or MALDEF. IDRA and MALDEF have had an enduring 50-year partnership in which they have been critical to developing and ensuring educational civil rights for all students, particularly those who are emergent bilingual students, who are Black and brown students, and who are students from families with limited incomes. And so when you think of a major landmark case involving education equity, particularly students of color, chances are that IDRA is going to be behind that case, whether it's legal strategy or providing expertise on the witness stand, or advocating the legislature after successful court decision to ensure that what it happened in the courtroom is translated then into sustainable and bold public policy. And so some of the major wins that we've seen in the legislature is that IDRA has been a part of is first bilingual education law in Texas. We were part of drafting that law. We have been part of drafting similar laws at the federal level. we provided key expertise in the case that ensures that all children, regardless of immigration status, have the right to an education, a free public education, and then of course ensuring that all students, regardless of their language, can access education in Texas and at the federal level.
How do you know, or how much work do you do beforehand to say, hey, this is how we make this a sustainable change? It's not a kind of a Band-Aid solution, it's something that's going to pave the way for a much better educational system.
I think you will always see pendulum swings in terms of momentum for education equity, and we're seeing that right now. I think for the first time in a while, education is more than just a line in the State of the Union address by the U.S. President. We are seeing it as a real electoral issue, an issue that people are getting out to the polls and voting on, and we're seeing a backlash, frankly, as our society becomes more open and more inclusive. You see a pushback as students bring their full selves to the classroom, whether that be students who are bringing their assets like their languages, their home languages, and as emergent bilingual students, whether that is LGBTQ plus students, whether that there is more awareness in terms of teaching and talking about race in history and in current events. You see a backlash, and so I think to build sustainable change, you have to build people power, and that is something that we strive to do every day at IDRA, and we do that by ensuring that the people who are most impacted by what is going on in the classroom and what is going on in the halls of power are driven and center the communities that we work with.
If we can do anything with this video, it's please anyone who sees this, no matter what you look like, no matter how you identify, know that you can be a change maker, and there's a ton of support here for you. And if you can't find it in your immediate school district, reach out to IDRA. There's a lot of tools to get you plugged into those networks, so please take advantage of them.
Can I say one thing in response to what you just said?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just that I totally agree. I think it's, as I said, I think it's wonderful when young people are involved, and IDRA has really specific and wonderful programs that help young people to be engaged. One is our Youth Advisory Board, which is for high school students who want to learn more about policy research and policy making and advocacy strategies, and so we have a cohort of high school students that advises us on our policy positions and our advocacy strategies. We have a policy fellowship where we provide real-world training during Texas and Georgia legislative sessions for advocates who want to learn what that world is like. That can be, the Texas and Georgia capitals can be scary places for people, especially for people who have traditionally been left out and excluded from those spaces. So our fellowship program is a 9-month program that's designed to expose people to policymaking at the state level. And that has been a really important tool for young people to get involved in our work. And then we do a lot of participatory action research projects. So we make sure that young people are driving research and they're surveying and getting policy recommendations and getting feedback from other young people to really shape our knowledge around a lot of these issues and make sure that we are responsive to what students are saying they want and need in their schools and communities. And we're especially excited to do that work and commemorate our 50th anniversary of doing that work. I think IDRA has had a long history of working closely with young people and with families to really shape our work and drive what our policy and our advocacy positions are, to really drive our research. And so it's exciting to be able to continue that work and think about what the next 50 years will look like. Some of our bigger wins include really influencing what school funding formulas look like, making sure that students, particularly emergent bilingual students and students from families with limited means, are included in funding formulas, really changing what language programs look like for emergent bilingual programs, and then policies to make sure that when we talk about school safety and what safe schools look like for students, we aren't compromising the daily safety of our students in order to put in certain security measures. Those are some of the large issues that we've been working on recently, in addition to what you probably hear about all the time, like school privatization issues. So vouchers in Texas and Georgia, we've been fighting back against those, and really efforts to undermine our public education system.
Final question, is there anything that you want to leave folks watching with, be a call to action? How can they help you all? Is it donations, is it time, or what are you in most need of right now?
I think that in our mission and our vision of building people power, we need everybody to see themselves as an education leader and an education advocate. We know that education has been a bedrock of our democracy, and so we encourage you to stay involved and to be involved in your local school, be involved here, watch the news, be involved in the policy-making bodies around you. We encourage you to resist efforts to divest, demonize, and privatize public schools, what we call the Texas three-step, and ensure that we are strengthening not just our public schools, but by doing so, strengthening our democracy here in this country.
So that's going to be everything. I just want to give another huge thanks to IDRA for letting me come and interview their staff and highlight a lot of their programs. I think they are such a cool organization focused on empowering students to really just have a better learning experience in the classroom. And I love that they do all this through student input and putting student beliefs at the forefront of a lot of the changes and the policies that they're making, right? So that way if the student doesn't feel valued in the classroom, they can figure out why and work towards a positive change that works for everyone in the local community. So again, please make sure to check out the links below. I put a ton of content so you can get in contact with IDRA, learn to start building policy changes, and regardless of where you are in the world, start learning more just about how policy changes can work and how you can be a local activist in your own community. And as always, I'm the nicest Nick. I'll see you next time.